Shalom and welcome to His Israel. This is Karen Hannah in Jerusalem, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 11th Hebrew month of SHEVAT, which starts today actually. And during the month of SHEVAT, our attention is drawn to different aspects of relationship. And so our verse for the month is Ecclesiastes chapter 4 verse 12, a very well-known verse. I'm sure you know it, and it's a three-stranded cord is not easily broken, and it's in accord with our verse for the month at the Tu B'Shvat Seder, which is held on the 15th of Shvat, which is Tu B'Shvat. Shalom Alana, I'm glad you could make it. So we're talking about the fact that the three-stranded cord cannot easily be broken. And at the Tu B'Shvat Seder, the three-stranded cord is actually comprised of God and His land and His people. And oh, by the way, if you're interested in finding some information or just checking out what a Tu B'Shvat Seder is all about, it's similar to a Passover Seder actually. But when we post the notes to accompany the video, you'll find a link there on the His Israel website. But so at this Tu B'Shvat Seder, there are also three major themes to the Seder. And the first one is to give thanks and praise to God for His creation of the beautiful trees and their fruit, with a special focus on the 7 species that are grown in Israel. And of course those you find in Deuteronomy chapter 8 verses 9 and 10. Now the first 3 are not actually trees, because it starts with wheat and barley and grapes, which are also very important crops, but they're not actual trees. And the first tree is mentioned fourth, and that is the fig tree. Interestingly enough, it's also the first tree mentioned in the Bible, which we remember Adam and Eve took the fig leaves to sew clothes to cover themselves. They realized suddenly they were naked, and that's why some people actually believe that maybe the fruit they ate was a fig, because figs can be very delicious and succulent and tempting. So and they took the leaves of that tree to cover them, so maybe that was the fruit with which they sinned, but we don't know. We won't know till we meet them. But so the first theme of the Seder is to praise God and thank Him for these wonderful trees and the gifts of their fruit. Now the second theme is recalling our beginning to the Garden of Eden, with the tree of life in the center. So that's probably the major tree, the 2 trees in the garden, but the tree of life was centered in the garden, and we recall that, and the relationship that we enjoyed there, well, 4 parents, Adam and Eve, enjoyed there with our Father. And then 3, the third theme, is creating a greater awareness of our task of restoring the garden, and of how we can actively participate in God's unfolding plan of redemption, which is to reverse the curse. And so we can do this by caring for our environment, both physically and spiritually. Now, so we were mentioning the trees in the 7 species, and I've just seen Debbie join us from Rimonim. Now, the first tree was the 4th fruit, as it were mentioned, which was the fig tree, and the next one is the pomegranate, which in Hebrew is rimonim. And Debbie lives in a beautiful place called Rimonim in the Shomron. And then after the pomegranate comes the olive tree. the beautiful olive, which we can talk about for hours, but we will not now. You can do that at the Seder. And then the fourth tree mentioned is the date palm, which is a beautiful tree, of course, as well. And actually, in the holy place, the tree God chose to have embroidered on the curtains, like part of his decorating, was the palm tree. And why? Because palm trees are tall and they wave and they say, "Come here for water and food and shade and rest." And that is what he says to us. He's calling us always, "Come to me, and in my presence you will find food and water and shelter and rest." And also in Psalm 92, verse 13, the righteous are compared to a palm tree. In Hebrew, it's tzaddik ketamar ifrach, that the righteous person will blossom like a palm tree. And palm trees, of course, are very special trees because they provide that every part of them can be used to provide for the needs of people and others. The fruit to eat, the palm leaves can be woven into baskets or mats, very useful. And even the pits, the date pits, can be used as food for the animals. So there's just so many, it's a very giving tree full of gifts. So that's why the righteous are compared to a palm tree, because they're giving and doing good deeds as well. All right, so now during SHEVAT, we also focus on another three, our three central relationships. And those, of course, are one, firstly with God, secondly with ourselves, and third with others. And in every relationship, it's designed to enjoy their depths, designed, in love and in truth, which we can enjoy in a relationship. And you can actually compare it to a three-legged stool. Now, a stool with three legs needs all three in order to stand securely and firmly. And in a relationship, the legs on which it stands are, of course, God, who must be in the center of a relationship if it is to be really in all the depths and possibilities are to be enjoyed. But the other two are love and truth, because God is the source of love and truth. And so if those three aren't strong and standing and growing in strength, even the tree is the stool is going to be very shaky. If just it can't stand for very long on two legs. So we need those, and of course we find this in our most intimate relationship, which is marriage. But it's true for others as well. It's true in relationships with our children, with our siblings, with our friends, and even with our business colleagues, that you need the God and His truth and love to really make a relationship strong and enduring. Now, if we think about our relationship with God, a key element of that is faith. And, we can't, we need faith to believe in something we can't see. For example, I don't need faith to believe in my glass of water here that I can touch and drink from, actually. Excuse me. But God, we can't actually see with our eyes. Hello, Audrey's here from South Africa. That's wonderful. You could be here, Audrey. Shalom. Shalom. So we're talking about faith in our relationship with God. Now, but in Hebrew, the word for faith is emunah. And emunah is different from the way that we translate. It's usually translated into English, because in English, if you think of faith, it usually carries the meanings of belief or a set of principles or a body of dogma. But in Hebrew, it's rather more like illustrated in the lives of the patriarchs in Genesis, because the word emunah is mainly associated with faithfulness and relationships, and it includes loyalty, commitment, trust, and acting with integrity. Now, if you think of those characteristics, I'll say them again. This is all part of faith in Hebrew. It's loyalty, commitment, trust, and acting with integrity. Now, all of those are part of what we would call a covenant relationship. Now, interestingly, from the very beginning in Genesis, the whole wonders of creation are only contained in a number of verses. But then the first marriage that's described, we know Abraham and Sarah were married, but we don't have a description of that. But we have a description of the courting and the marriage and the whole relationship between Isaac and Rebekah. And that's given chapters. So it just shows that in God's eyes, this relationship was even more important to him than his whole creation, his whole acts, wonders of creation. Now, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, in his commentary, Covenant and Conversation, he explains how it is in marriage that, and this is what he says, marriage comes closest to the deep resonances of the biblical idea of covenant. A covenant is a mutual act of commitment in which two persons, honoring their differences, each respecting the dignity of the other, come together in a bond of love to join their destinies and chart a future together. When the prophets want to speak of a covenant relationship between God and his people, they constantly use the metaphor of marriage. And you see that through the prophets. So we don't have time for examples now, but I'm sure you can think of many of those. I thought that was a beautiful description of the biblical idea of covenant and faithfulness and faith in relationships. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. As I think of it, I see it that the major difference between the God of Israel and other worldly gods, whether it be the Greek gods or Allah or the pantheon of Hindu gods or the secular god of self and materialism, the big difference is that he is a God of truth, love, and faithfulness. And there we get the three again: truth, love, and faithfulness. God doesn't impose his will on us by force or violence, but he gently pursues us and woos us, just like a person in love, man in love woos his beloved. And he draws us to himself by his Spirit. And why? Because his heart, he desires a relationship of love and trust, not one of fear and domination and slavery, subservience. He's a God of love. And surely this is a perfect, shining example for us in our relationships as well. So that I thought was really beautiful, that he is a God of love and faithfulness, and we need to imitate him in our relationships as well. So we mentioned that the most important relationship we have after God is with ourselves. Why? Isn't that selfish? No, because why? The more we are rightly related to and in tune with our deepest selves, our souls, then the more genuinely and intimately we'll be able to relate and interact in love and truth with others. And what hinders us from walking fully in the light of who we truly are and who God created us to be, he created us to be a radiant soul. But what hinders us is it's been termed by some as our shadow self. Now, let's take a quick look at that, because I thought it's very important. What is this shadow self? We're supposed to be a radiant, shining soul, but there is this shadow. Just as we have a physical shadow, it's almost as if emotionally or in our minds, we have a shadow as well. And we've actually considered this, I think, in the last month or so, when we were looking at the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara. It is at work in us all the time, like a tug of war. The Yetzer HaTov is our positive, proactive side that acts in accord and harmony with the will of God. But the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is our negative, reactive side that just reacts in ways that are against God's will for good, even for our own good. So there's a little bit of that in this concept of the shadow self as well. But usually this negative shadow self carries some form of shame and low self-esteem. If there's any aspect of shame or low self-esteem, it's part of that shadow self. It's any part that we may dislike about ourselves. And it's usually connected with feelings of pain or fear and shame. And these feelings, we've buried them and disowned them. And painful emotions that are repressed and that are now become buried in our subconscious. And then the effect this has actually is that we just feel that we're unlovable because there's something wrong with us. It's just like an illusion that if we can keep these parts of us hidden, then we will be loved. So we see this shadow self as a kind of saboteur who may expose our imperfections and get us in trouble or ruin our relationships. So instead of facing any fear or pain, we bury it because we don't want that to disturb our appearances to others or our relationships with others. And it all begins in childhood. Actually, when we so desperately want our parents to love us and be proud of us. And so anything that displeases them becomes hidden and repressed. You just push it down and hide it, as it were. All little children need the love and protection and approval and touch and security of their parents, because the parents represent God. God's presence in the relationship to these little tiny children. And of course, as a child starts growing, it experiences the many traumas that are just there, part of being human. And then, but as the pain from these traumas or the shame gets pushed and hidden and suppressed, the negative self, the shadow self, grows bigger and bigger. And of course, its hallmark is fear and shame. And because of that, it keeps hidden very well. The more we can hide it and cover up these things, the more we think the better we're doing. But it's just the opposite, because shame, the shame that goes with it, tells you that you're not worthy, that something's wrong with you, or you're not as good as other people, and it inflicts a sense of guilt. So any areas in our lives where we feel maybe a sense of shame or guilt, or it's just little indications that some things have been buried and repressed that need to come into the light. So what can be done to transform this shadow self from negative to positive? And this transformation is possible, by the way. We just have to be willing in faith and trust in the power and light of God's Spirit. We have to just trust that this is His will, that to bring these things out into the light. So to look inward and discover and actually befriend and forgive this part of the self. Someone could have been told by their parents, you're just stupid, you're not going to do well at school, look at you, you're just not you're not able to run fast and excel in sports, and and any negativity that's sown into a child will get buried, because it brings with it shame and guilt. So as soon as you see and recognize it and actually befriend that part of yourself, and just forgive any negativity that has accompanied it, then the healing begins, and hidden fear and shame and whatever are released into the light. And it's also a great blessing if you have a loving friend or a trusted mentor with whom to share this journey of discovery and transformation. It just does really help. And also to remember the verse in Romans chapter 8, verses 1 and 2, it says, "There is now no condemnation for those who are in Messiah Yeshua. For the law of the Spirit of life has set you free from the law of sin and death." And we know the enemy of our souls, who's constantly bringing condemnation and accusation and negativity, that, we know those are the lies of the enemy. And so as we allow the Spirit of God and of life and truth and light into those places, then the transformation happens, which is a beautiful thing to receive. Now, considering our theme of relationship and our quest for transformation, because we all have parts in us that are weaknesses that need to grow, and these things that need to just be taken care of. We have a wonderful friend. She's a photographer and writer, Raina Myers. You'll see her in the Being Holy, Being Whole, Keep Climbing group. She's one of our precious fellow climbers. She expressed this in an article on her blog, and I'll just read you part of it because it's so beautiful and it just connects with what we're talking about. And a link to the full article, which is called Faithful Fight, will also be in the notes once they're posted up. But Raina says, "The most challenging place for fears to become uncovered for me has been in the most intimate relationship of my life with my husband. It is not fear of him that I'm speaking of. It's fears about me, my questions, doubts about myself, and the baggage I carry that speaks the loudest in the most camouflaged ways. It is the truest place I'm learning faithfulness, true emunah. It is the place I'm learning covenant language, and it continues to wake and resuscitate me in the process. Because what can be brought to life but that which is dead? Not the death that destroys, but rather the seeds that fall to the ground dead, equipped and designed for their purpose, which is to die in order to live dead." And you think of what's that verse, if a grain of wheat doesn't fall to the ground, it won't yield its harvest. And she says, that's us. These words and ideas can be scary and bring confusion or conflict to our souls. They do mine, until I am reminded about resurrection again. The hope of resurrection brings contentment, a place where we do not have to try to control everything. We do not have to hold on so tight in our fears. We get to dance with hope. If we're going to give a faithful fight for life and love and all that is truly dear, let us turn our eyes and hands and feet towards a world that one day will be made new, understanding that we have a place in that healing today, here and now. It's true. Our vision, our eyes should always be set towards the final redemption that will come, where everything will be made whole and perfect, and be restored to the garden once again, and all its beauty and wonder in the presence of the Lord. But God is wanting us to work with Him here and now to bring tikkun olam, the healing of the world that's necessary, and He will give us what to do. He'll and enable us, and and every little bit of healing counts. And she just finishes by saying, love, real love, raucous as it is at the core a humble thing that gives of itself. Love denies itself rights and entitlements, because that is what love incarnate did. Love enters another's world with humility and vulnerability. And I was just thinking where she said it's a humble thing that gives of itself. I was remembering the palm tree, and it also that beautiful story about the giving tree. So that was beautifully written by our friend Raina Myers. Right, we have a bit more time, I think, to think of, in the light of understanding the shadow self, maybe shallow self, and how to transform it from negative to positive. There are also three things that are involved, actually. Any transformation, whether it's physical, mental, or spiritual, it begins with knowledge, and then intention, and then commitment. So those three elements are necessary in any, because change is difficult. No change or transformation is easy, but you have to begin with knowledge. Gaining knowledge of what exactly needs attention in order to bring about the change and effect transformation. So, we know in this life that none of us, nobody becomes perfectly holy and whole. We don't reach that perfection of holiness and wholeness. But in truth, that is what we should be aiming for and working towards, to learn and to grow and to become, as far as we're able, to become the person that our Father created us to be. That He had a plan and a design, a unique design for each of our lives. And we should be aiming towards that. And that's what we've been doing in this series. Keep climbing, keep aiming, keep trying, and be spiraling up higher and higher as far as we can with His help and grace. Now, they're minor, relatively minor weaknesses or traits such as procrastination, laziness, clutter, but these, with the correct intention and plan of action and commitment, you've got those three: knowledge, recognize it, have intention to do something about it, and then be committed to do something about it. These can be worked on and transformed quite easily. But there are more serious behavior patterns that sometimes are more difficult to recognize, such as codependency, which at its root is a dysfunctional relationship with oneself. And that can include victimization, anxiety in relationships, and trying to fix others all the time. And others are substance or medication abuse, eating disorders, love or sex addiction, work addiction, compulsive gambling. You can think of even exercising or internet or shopping addiction. They all need deeper understanding and stronger intention and commitment if you're going to try and address those to bring some improvement or transformation in those. Another thing we mentioned in the Keep Climbing series that really struck many of us, which said every problem is mental and every solution is spiritual. So the big battle goes on in our minds. I mean, it's like the truth versus the lies versus the negative and the positive. So all problems actually, it said, are mental in the mind, but the solution must come from the spirit. So why is this so true about the mind? Because any negative pattern of thought or behavior is hardwired in the brain. So these negative patterns are a state of mind that one isn't enforced on one almost, if depending on the environment one grew up in, or just thought patterns that become entrenched. But they're all hardwired in the brain. And these things hinder us in partnering with God to co-create and to fulfill to our utmost the reason He is for giving us our life here on earth. So this is why it's important to work at it and to try and understand these things. And paradoxically, a lot of these compulsive addictions are an attempt to fill a spiritual void. So they might be all happening in our head and physically, but what they're really trying to do is fulfill, like if you see major compulsive shoppers whose homes get just filled with purchases, some of them aren't even opened, and that's trying to fill a void inside, a spiritual void. And so all these things for feeling, if we're wanting to feel the true depths of love and achieving deeper sense of peace and unity with others, with humankind as a whole, and with God Himself, we need to be working on these things and recognizing them and trusting Him to help us grow and become the person that He truly created us to be. Okay, well, I think the good news is, as we are willing to open up any dark places in our subconscious shadow self to the Spirit of holiness, God's healing light will shine in. We know He's more than able, and as we cooperate with Him to heal, rewire, restore, and raise us up to be the extraordinary person He created each of us to be, we are reassured or assured in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 10, which I think is so beautiful. Listen to this. It says, after you've suffered a little while, because as I said, change or growth isn't always easy, but after you've tried and suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to His eternal glory in Messiah, will Himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. What a promise. So we just have to do our little bit to work with Him, cooperate with Him, and He will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. So rather than turning away and trying to keep, when there's light shining, if your back is turned towards it, all you see is the dark shadow, your shadow in front of you. But if you turn to face the light, the shadow behind you actually grows larger. It's like that movie title. It says, cast a giant shadow. But that will be one that is positive and a reflection of the true self, because you're facing the light and the shadow can be reflected behind you. So we can stand tall and shine His light and truth into the world, all for His glory. Amen. So dear friends, let us really determine this SHEVAT to say, all right, Lord, I want to work with you. I want to cooperate with you. I want you to raise me up, confirm me, and establish me as the unique person that you created me to be a radiant soul, worthy of honor, but all for His glory. Amen and amen. Shalom, everyone, and blessings from Jerusalem.